The first thing Ben remembered was not this morning, but another one. He was 5 then, small enough that his feet dangled from the kitchen chair. His parents had been fighting quietly, voices clipped, almost polite. His mother said she was fine, but her eyes were wet. His father said nothing, but his silence was louder than shouting. And Ben, too young to explain why he knew, whispered, "You're pretending." The room went still. His mother froze, startled not by his words, but by how true they were. That was the first time Ben realized he could see things other people didn't want seen. Now, 3 years later, he wakes in the same house, under the same ceiling, already listening for the weight of the day. The alarm has not rung, but he is awake. He always wakes before the noise. He lies there in the dim light, holding the memory of that first silence inside him, like a secret stone in his pocket. He doesn't move right away. He lies still, blanket pulled to his chin, eyes tracing the faint cracks in the ceiling. The shadows stretch long, soft, shifting with the light. He imagines them alive, bending with his thoughts. His father's footsteps strike the hallway, fast, clipped, impatient. His mother's follow, lighter, slower, pausing once at the kitchen door. Already, Ben knows, today will not be gentle. He rolls on to his side and stares at the dresser across the room. His clothes are folded neatly, laid out from the night before. A habit his mother insists on. To Ben, they feel less like choices and more like costumes. What he wears to pass unnoticed in a world that always notices him too much. Reluctantly, he slides from bed, feet touching the cool floorboards. The house feels cold, though the air is not. He pads to the bathroom, closing the door quietly, as if the sound might disturb the fragile balance of the morning. In the mirror, his face stares back at him, pale and serious. He studies it longer than most children would, not out of vanity, but curiosity. Why does he feel older than 8 when his face still looks so small? He brushes his teeth slowly, listening to the distant clatter of dishes downstairs, the faint murmur of voices. He can't make out the words, but he doesn't need to. Tone is always louder than content. Dressed, he makes his way down the stairs. The smell of toast hangs in the air. His mother greets him with a smile that almost convinces him. Almost. He sees how quickly it fades when she turns back to the sink. His father's newspaper rustles like a shield. Ben takes his seat at the table, spoon dipping into cereal. He chews carefully, quietly, as though any sudden sound might crack the silence further. No one asks how he slept. No one needs to. Ben knows the morning is already set, its shape decided by moods too heavy for words. He eats, observing, absorbing, tucking away every detail. It feels less like breakfast and more like another lesson in reading the world. One he never asked to take, but can't seem to stop learning. When breakfast is finished, Ben slips his bowl into the sink. His mother thanks him softly, distracted, and his father folds the newspaper with a snap that feels louder than it is. Shoes, jacket, backpack. Ben moves through the motions as if rehearsed. He knows not to speak too much in the morning. Words fall heavy here. Today it is his father who drives him to school. The car ride is a tunnel of silence. The radio hums low, some station his father barely listens to. Outside the window, the world blurs. Trees bending in the wind, houses stacked close together. The pale morning sky stretched thin. Ben rests his head against the glass, watching patterns in the condensation. His finger traces a line that branches like a river, and he imagines following it somewhere far away. Every so often, his father clears his throat, as if about to say something, but the words never arrive. Ben doesn't push. He has learned that silence is safer than asking questions that adults don't want to answer. Still, he feels the weight of the unsaid filling the car, thicker than the music, thicker than the air. At a red light, Ben glances at the car beside them. A boy about his age sits in the back seat, laughing, his mother turning toward him with a bright smile. The sound doesn't reach Ben through the glass, but he feels it anyway, a lightness he can't imagine in his own mornings. For a moment, he wonders what it would be like to start the day that way, to wake up into a world that didn't feel like a test of endurance. The light changes and the car moves on. Ben presses his forehead to the glass, letting the cold seep into his skin. It steadies him, anchors him, makes the flood of impressions just a little quieter. He watches the school building grow larger through the window, its brick walls solid and unwelcoming, and steels himself for the noise waiting inside. The car pulls into the school lot, wheels crunching over gravel. Ben's father mutters something. "Have a good day." Not unkind, but flat, as if the words belong more to the routine than to him. Ben nods, gripping the strap of his backpack. When the car door opens, the world rushes in, cold air sharp with the smell of exhaust. Shouts from children spilling across the yard, the clang of the bell echoing off the walls. After the hush of the car, it feels like stepping into a storm. Ben slides out slowly, backpack hanging loose, feet dragging for a moment before he forces them forward. He feels the shift immediately, the eyes of other children darting, the collisions of laughter and pushing and teasing, the undercurrent of alliances and exclusions already alive before the first class begins. He pauses at the edge of the walkway, taking it in. For others, this is just school. For Ben, it is a maze of signals to read, an atmosphere to endure. He notices the boy leaning against the wall, pretending not to care that no one called his name. He notices the girl laughing too loudly, masking her nerves with sound. He notices the teacher by the door, smiling warmly, but with lines of fatigue around her eyes. Every detail enters him like weather. He doesn't ask for it, but he can't turn it off. It's as if the world is always speaking, and he is the only one who can't stop listening. The bell rings again, louder this time, and the crowd surges forward. Ben takes a breath, steps into it, and lets himself be carried inside. The hallway swallows him whole. Shoes slap against tile, lockers clang shut, voices rise and fall in bursts that crash together like waves. For most of the kids, it's just noise. Background to their jokes, their chatter, their secret plans for recess. For Ben, it's a flood. Every tone has weight. Every word hooks into him. He walks slowly, keeping close to the wall, his backpack bumping against his side. Groups form and dissolve around him. Cliques already crystallizing even at 8 years old. He notices who pushes to the center, who hovers at the edges, who pretends not to care while scanning for a place to belong. It's all visible to him, patterns etched in their movements. He passes 2 boys laughing too loudly. The laughter is sharp, aimed like stones at another child farther down the hall. Ben feels the sting before the boy does, as if the cruelty travels through him first. His stomach tightens. He wants to turn, to speak, to intercept. But the thought of all those eyes swiveling toward him, curious, judging, freezes him in place. So he lowers his gaze, lets the wave of laughter pass. and keeps walking. At his locker, he fumbles with the combination, fingers stiff, mind still tangled in the moment he didn't stop. Behind him, a girl slams her own locker shut and sighs, shoulders drooping. No one notices, but Ben does. He notices everything, and the noticing sits heavy, layering onto what he already carries from breakfast, from the car ride, from every silence that came before. The bell rings again, louder, echoing off the walls. The tide of children surges toward their classrooms. Ben exhales, shoulders bracing. The storm of the hallway breaks into smaller storms behind doors. And now it is time for him to enter his own. The classroom smells faintly of chalk and pencil shavings, a mix that always makes Ben's chest feel tight. Rows of desks wait like little cages, names taped neatly at the corners. His is near the window, close enough to the light to drift away, but not so close to the front that anyone expects too much from him. He slips into his chair, keeping his backpack at his feet like a shield. The noise of the hallway fades, replaced by a new rhythm. Chairs scraping, notebooks slapping open, the shuffle of restless bodies. The teacher stands at the front, her voice steady, smiling as she calls the class to order. Most of the children don't notice the weariness at the edges of her smile. Ben does. It lingers there like a shadow behind the light. He keeps his eyes low, following the motions without drawing attention. Around him, whispers dart between friends, laughter rises and dies in little bursts. Each one feels like a spark in the air, something he can't help but track. Even when he tries to focus on his own page, the currents pull at him. A boy 2 desks over struggles with his pencil, gripping it too tightly. Ben feels the frustration burn in his own fingers. A girl in the back answers too quickly, her voice higher than usual. Ben knows it's not confidence, but nerves. The lesson begins. Numbers on the board, sentences read aloud. Ben listens, but not only to the words. He listens to the tone, to the hesitations, to the spaces between. When the teacher calls on another boy and the boy stumbles, laughter trickles through the room. It hits Ben like a stone in his stomach. He looks at the boy's face, the flush, the tight lips, and it is as though he is the one standing there, exposed. The shame crawls under his own skin. He presses his pencil to the page, pretending to write, though his thoughts scatter. What does it mean to feel someone else's hurt as though it is his own? Is it a gift or a flaw? The other children seem untouched, already moving on. Ben still feels it, heavy, as though the laughter has been carved into him. The clock ticks. The teacher's voice drones on. Sunlight creeps across the floor, stretching toward his desk. Ben stares at the light, wishing he could step into it and vanish. The lesson continues. A steady stream of words that wash past him. Fractions on the board, sentences read from the book. None of it stays. Instead, Ben drifts. His pencil hovers over the page, scratching shapes instead of numbers. Little spirals, tiny doorways, lines that weave into patterns. He tells himself he's still listening, but his mind has slipped elsewhere, into stories where things make more sense than they do here. In his daydream, the classroom isn't rows of desks, but a forest clearing. The children are shadows moving between trees, their voices echoing like birds. He imagines himself a guardian of the clearing, someone who sees what others miss. The hidden paths, the signs in the branches. In the dream, this gift makes him strong. In the real classroom, it makes him strange. The teacher's voice cuts through. Ben? Would you read the next problem? clearing collapses. He blinks at the page, heat rushing to his face. The numbers swim for a moment before he finds them, pulls them into sense and reads them aloud. His voice is soft, careful. Not wrong, but not confident. A few heads turn. Someone at the back stifles a laugh. Not cruel, maybe, but enough. Ben feels it anyway, sharp and heavy. Good, the teacher says, already moving on. Relief floods him, but it doesn't wash away the shame. He can still feel the moment hanging in the air, even as everyone else forgets. He glances at the clock. The hands move too slowly, as though mocking him. Outside the window, sunlight glints off the playground. He watches it, a bright promise of escape. But even that thought carries tension. Recess is louder than class, and in some ways, harder. For now, he falls back into silence, pencil tracing shapes no one will see, mind drifting again. The forest returns, the shadows soften, and in that private world, the laughter doesn't touch him. The classroom hums on, the rhythm of pencils scratching, pages turning, voices rising and falling in small bursts. Ben lowers his gaze to his notebook, though his attention keeps slipping sideways. He notices the boy next to him, biting his lip raw, erasing the same line over and over until the paper nearly tears. He notices the girl in the front row sitting straighter than usual, as if posture alone might keep her from being called on. None of these details are his business, yet they cling to him, uninvited. He wonders, not for the first time, why it feels like he's carrying more than just his own day. Everyone else seems able to let things slide. A mistake, a laugh, a scolding. For Ben, every moment leaves a trace, as though he is a page too soft to withstand the ink. The teacher's voice fills the air again, steady, patient, a little weary. She explains the same problem twice, then 3 times, her tone growing heavier each round. Ben feels her frustration like a weight in his chest, even though it isn't aimed at him. He wants to do something, to lift it, to ease it. But he is 8, and children are not supposed to fix their teachers. Minutes crawl. His eyes drift again to the window. The playground is empty, but he imagines it alive. The squeal of swings, the rush of running feet, the clatter of games. Out there, time moves faster. In here, the clock ticks loud and slow, each second stretched thin. And then finally, the bell. It rings sharp and metallic, slicing through the classroom's stillness. Chairs scrape back, voices leap up. A sudden eruption of motion. Relief surges through Ben, but not without dread. The bell does not bring freedom, only a different kind of storm. He closes his notebook carefully, slides it into his desk, and waits just long enough for the first rush of bodies to pour past him. Only then does he rise, moving quietly toward the door, bracing for the noise that always comes next. The hallway explodes with voices as the children spill out, racing for the playground. Ben drifts along the edge of the crowd, carried by their momentum, but never quite part of it. By the time he steps outside, the air feels different, brighter, colder, filled with the clang of swings and the pounding of feet on pavement. Most of the children scatter quickly into their groups, picking up games that seem to begin without being explained. A ball arcs across the yard, followed by shouts. 2 girls clasp hands and run, laughter trailing behind them. To Ben, it looks less like play and more like choreography. Invisible rules binding everyone, rules he was never given. He walks slowly to the edge of the blacktop, where the painted lines fade into patches of grass. From here, he can see everything without being seen. He watches the boy who always runs to the center of the game, voice louder than anyone else's, commanding as if it were his right. He watches the smaller children who orbit around him, laughing when he laughs, shrinking when he scowls. He notices the one boy standing just outside the circle, pretending to tie his shoe, though no one called him in. The boy's shoulders slump, and Ben feels the heaviness settle in his own chest. For a moment, Ben imagines walking over, saying something, making space. But the thought of all those eyes turning toward him, questioning, narrowing, freezes him in place. He stays where he is, silent, watching, carrying the loneliness that isn't his but might as well be. A group of children rush past him, chasing the ball. One brushes his shoulder, not unkindly, just too quickly. The touch jolts him back into his body. He turns toward the fence, where weeds push stubbornly through the cracks. He kneels and traces them with his finger, following the way they bend toward the sun. The noise of the playground blurs, and for a few moments, he is somewhere else, inside the quiet geometry of leaves and shadows, where no one laughs at the wrong time, where nothing feels too heavy to hold. The whistle blows sharp and final. Recess ends. Children groan, shuffle, scatter back toward the doors. Ben rises slowly, brushing dirt from his knees, and follows at the back of the line. Another storm waits inside, but at least for a moment, he had found his quiet. The cafeteria is louder than the playground, but in a different way. The noise here doesn't move in bursts. It swells. A constant roar of trays clattering, chairs scraping, voices layering over one another, until it feels like the walls themselves are vibrating. Ben carries his tray carefully, eyes low, weaving through the shifting maze of tables. He scans the room without meaning to, noticing who sits where, who slides closer to whom, who leaves empty seats between themselves and the others. Invisible borders cut across the tables, as sharp as fences. He feels them without needing to be told. At the corner table, a group of boys shout over each other, trading jokes that sting more than they amuse. One boy forces a laugh that doesn't reach his eyes. Ben feels it instantly. The brittle edge, the small fracture hidden in the sound. Across the room, two girls lean close, whispering, glancing toward another who sits alone with her sandwich. The girl eats slowly, pretending not to notice, shoulders curved inward. Ben's chest tightens. He wants to move toward her to take the empty seat at her side. But the thought of every head swiveling, the silence that would fall for just a second before the whispers began, it stops him cold. His body chooses safety, even when his heart aches for something braver. So he slips into a seat near the end of a half-filled table, far enough from the center to be overlooked. He opens his lunch quietly, eating in small, careful bites. Around him, conversations rise and fall, laughter peaking and breaking, but he doesn't join. Instead, he observes, absorbing the currents he cannot escape. The food has little taste. What he swallows is the weight of the room, the hunger for belonging, the fear of rejection, the sharp edges of games no one admits are being played. The afternoon passes in fragments. Lessons blur together, numbers, maps, sentences. But Ben drifts through them, half present, half elsewhere. His pencil scratches quietly, but more often it sketches than writes. A tree, a river, a face he can't quite name. When the teacher calls on him again, he answers softly, carefully, not wrong, but not sure either. A few heads turn, then turn away. The room moves on, but the moment stays with him. Another stone added to the pocket he already carries. The clock ticks too loudly, each hand dragging across the face, as though time itself resists release. Ben rests his chin on his hand, eyes wandering again to the window. Outside, the light has shifted. Softer now, stretched thin across the pavement. He imagines stepping into it and disappearing, leaving behind the noise, the weight, the endless scanning of every room. And then the final bell. A rush of relief floods the air as chairs scrape back. Voices spike, footsteps pound. Children pour into the hallway, louder now, tasting freedom. Ben gathers his things slowly, waiting until the first surge has passed before slipping into the flow. The hallway is the same storm as morning, but lighter now, edged with excitement instead of dread. Still, he feels each shove, each burst of laughter, each undercurrent of rivalry, and it wears on him as much as the lessons did. Outside, the air feels cooler, sharper. Parents wait in cars. Buses rumble at the curb. Ben finds his way to the car where his father sits, engine idling, eyes fixed on something in the distance. He climbs in quietly, the door shutting with a hollow thud. The ride home is a mirror of the ride to school, silence filling the space, the low hum of the radio barely cutting it. Ben leans against the window, watching the world slide past. Houses blurring, trees bending, clouds shifting across the sky. He traces patterns in the glass again, lines that branch and wander as though searching for a way out. He doesn't speak, and neither does his father, but Ben still feels it. The heaviness in the car, the residue of unspoken things that follow them from morning into evening. He presses his forehead to the cool glass, closing his eyes. The day is ending, but the weight of it lingers, clinging like shadows he cannot shake. When the bell finally rings, it feels less like release than relief. Trays clatter again, chairs scrape back, and the tide of children surges toward the doors. Ben follows in their wake, shoulders lightening just slightly as the roar begins to fade behind him. The house greets him with the same silence he left behind that morning. His mother is at the stove, stirring something that smells of onions and garlic. She turns and smiles when he enters, soft but tired. His father disappears into another room without a word. The sound of the television flickering to life a few seconds later. Ben sets his backpack by the door, neatly, almost ritualistically, as if order might soften the tension that never quite leaves the air. He takes his seat at the table, hands folded in front of him, waiting. The clatter of pans, the low murmur of the TV, the creak of the floorboards. All of it speaks to him, a language of moods and movements. Dinner is quiet. His father asks about school, not really listening for an answer. His mother nods, offering bits of encouragement, but her eyes slide often toward the clock, as if she is somewhere else entirely. Ben answers politely, carefully, shaping his words to keep the peace. He doesn't mention the boy laughed at in class, or the girl eating alone in the cafeteria, or the loneliness he carried with him all day. Those things live inside him now, unspoken, like everything else in this house. When the plates are cleared, he retreats to his room with his homework. The numbers blur on the page, the words swim, and his pencil feels heavy in his hand. He does the work quietly, dutifully, but his mind drifts away. He imagines other places, other lives, where mornings begin with laughter instead of silence, where recess is an invitation instead of a test. From the living room, voices rise and fall. His parents speaking too low to hear, but not too low to feel. Their tone fills the walls, and the walls press against him. He pauses, staring at the lines of his homework, the neat columns of numbers, the tidy sentences. None of it matters. What matters is the heaviness in the house, the kind of heaviness that seeps through doors and floors and into his chest. He sets his pencil down and pulls out his sketch pad. The page receives him more kindly than the math ever could. He draws lines that curve into shapes, shapes that turn into faces, faces that blur into forests. The images come not from sight but from feeling. The fragments of the day, the laughter, the shame, the silence, all finding a place on paper. Time passes quietly. By the time his mother calls him back for a glass of milk before bed, the sky outside has gone dark, and the house feels heavier still. After homework and sketches, Ben drifts into the hallway. The glow of the television spills across the carpet from the living room. His father sits in the armchair, leaning forward, face lit in flickers of blue and white. His mother folds laundry on the couch, her hands moving quickly, almost urgently, as though speed alone might keep the silence from settling too thick. They speak occasionally, short words, clipped phrases about chores, about bills, about nothing that matters. The air between them is heavy all the same. Ben lingers at the edge of the hallway, unseen, listening not to their words, but to the spaces between them. Those spaces always speak louder. He returns to his room, closing the door softly, as though his small noise might disrupt the fragile balance outside. He lies on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Shadows from the streetlight outside shift slowly across the plaster, stretching long, bending, shrinking again. He watches them until they blur, and in their movements, he sees stories. Giants bending down to whisper secrets, waves rolling across an invisible sea, shapes that open like doors into worlds he will never enter. He wonders if other children see things this way, if they look at shadows and hear voices, if they walk through a day and feel the weight of every laugh, every sigh, every silence. Somehow he doubts it. They seem lighter. They run faster, laugh louder, move through moments without carrying them after. Ben carries everything. It stacks in him, layer upon layer, until he feels older than his body, as though childhood is something happening to other people. From downstairs, a sharp sound cuts through. A dropped dish, followed by a too quick assurance that everything is fine. Ben closes his eyes. He doesn't need to see it to know. He feels the ripple of frustration, the sigh of resignation, the silence that will settle back over them like dust. He turns onto his side, clutching the blanket closer. In his mind, he builds another world, one where mornings begin softly, where laughter is kind, where silence does not weigh like stone. He imagines himself there, not different, but understood. The muffled voices of his parents fade into the distance, replaced by the steady hum of night. In this quiet, Ben waits for the call to get ready for bed, both dreading and welcoming the end of another day. At last, his mother's voice calls up the stairs, softer now, almost melodic. Time to get ready for bed. Ben rises quietly, padding to the bathroom. The light above the mirror hums faintly. He brushes his teeth slowly, staring at his reflection, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth. His eyes look older than his face, as if they belong to someone who has been watching too long. He rinses, pats his cheeks dry, and listens. From below, the television clicks off, footsteps shifting. The house begins to fold inward, settling into night. Back in his room, he changes into pajamas laid neatly on the chair. He folds his day clothes with care, placing them in a small pile. Another ritual of order against the disorder he feels pressing from all sides. Then he climbs into bed, pulling the blanket high, waiting. His mother enters a few minutes later, carrying a worn book. She sits on the edge of his bed, her smile soft but shadowed. "Just a short chapter tonight," she says, though she always says that. Her voice fills the room as she reads, gentle and steady, the words flowing over him like water. Ben doesn't always follow the story. What matters is the rhythm, the warmth in her tone, the way her presence holds back the silence for a little while. He studies her face as she reads, the fine lines around her eyes, the weariness softened in the lamplight. He wants to ask her if she's really okay, the way he wanted to at breakfast, but he swallows the question. He has learned that adults don't always want their truths spoken aloud. When the chapter ends, she leans down, kisses his forehead, and whispers, "Good night, Ben." The lamp clicks off, and the room falls into shadow. Ben lies still, eyes open, watching the ceiling fade into darkness. The echoes of the day stir within him. The laughter in the hallway, the loneliness at recess, the heaviness at dinner. They drift and merge into shapes only he can see, symbols half dream and half memory. He lets them wash over him, not fighting, not holding, just noticing, the way he always does. Sleep comes slowly, like a tide. His thoughts scatter into fragments. A boy tying his shoe alone, a girl whispering behind her hand, a shadow bending across the ceiling. In the space between waking and dreaming, he hears it again. The quiet language of the world, speaking in silences and patterns, telling him stories no one else hears. His breathing deepens. The blanket rises and falls. The house settles, sighing into stillness. Tomorrow will come, bringing another day of listening, another day of carrying what others do not notice. But for now, Ben drifts into sleep, the weight of the world dissolving into dream. The house is silent now, but inside Ben's dreams the silence does not hold. Shapes stir, not clear, not solid, just impressions that slip away as soon as he reaches for them. Faces without names, voices without words, a current moving just beneath the surface. He turns in his sleep, his small body curled against the weight of things he cannot name. Outside, the night presses close. Inside, something keeps watching, waiting, speaking in a language he will never quite translate. And when the darkness deepens, the line between dream and waking thins. Tomorrow will come, but for now there is only this: a child lying in the dark, and a world that will not stop whispering.